Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Finance and Audit Committee meeting for the California High-Speed Rail Authority. Welcome and thank you for joining us from across the state of California. Today we are joined with committee members, Vice Chair Nancy Miller, Director Ernie Camacho, and Jim Galmetti. That constitutes the full committee, and this meeting is now in session. Before starting the agenda items today, I'm going to ask the secretary to let you know how you and the public can speak to this committee today and make whatever comments you may have. So Mo, would you please provide the information to the people in the public?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Today we are hosting this meeting via Zoom. In a moment, we will take public comment. First, we want to run through some important technical aspects of this meeting for offering public comment. If you are logged into this meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature, typically located at the bottom of your screen, so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allotted 2 minutes to provide comments. Our core reporter is on the line to record these comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. I will notify you when your time is nearly up. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you are welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link to our live stream.
Thank you, Mo.
Mr. Chairman, none of the attendees have raised their hands currently.
All right. If you see any raised hands, just let me know, and we'll make a place for them to make their comments. Seeing nobody at this point who is indicated an interest in commenting, we will now start the agenda for our March 25th, 2021 meeting. With that, agenda item number 1 this morning is the approval of the committee meetings.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Camacho and a second by Director Galmetti. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Director Miller, I think you might be muted.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, passed unanimously. Thank you. Item number 2, our committee chair comments, and I will pass on that today. So we'll move on to the item number 3, which is the audit report of the rail delivery partner contract compliance. And I believe is Teresa with us?
Yes. Hi. Good morning, Mr.
Teresa.
Chairman.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So just going to give you've all received a copy of the RDP report. I'll just go over the highlights of the report, and I will give the highlights, and then how the issues are being addressed is going to be addressed by Darren Kishiyama and I think Daniel Horgan. So if there's any questions at the end, if you could hold them to the end, then we can try to answer them. So our audit covered the first 3 years of the contract of HSR Agreement 14-66. So it's July 1st, 2015 through June 30, 2018. And we focused on reviewing billed and reimbursed costs for that period as of November 1st, 2018. Our audit included a total of 8 18 sub-consultants. This report that was just issued is speaking to 6 of those sub-consultant audits. So 5 of the sub-consultants were audited, and we attempted an audit of a 6th. And that's identified in this report. So total audited and reimbursed costs for those 5 sub-consultants were $39.9 million. And $1 million was not addressed because we did not include that in audit. It was unauditable. So the objectives of this audit were to determine whether the costs were billed in accordance with the terms of the agreement, including but not limited to the cost principles of the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 48, Part 31, and Title 49, Part 19. Based on the work that we performed, we found that in general, the costs were billed in accordance with the agreement and the CFRs and were supported and allowable except for $581,684. And those were from 3 particular sub-consultants that are listed in the report. That's Paragon Partners, Ascent Environmental, and Alta Vista Solutions. SC Solutions and Intura Consulting, as you can see, we had no findings. They were fine. And then, of course, Stephen J. Tillman Consulting was unauditable, and so that was $1 million that we didn't report on. The primary causes for the over-reimbursements were A, overstated overhead rates, and B, overstated direct labor cost. So throughout the process of this audit, these issues and the causes were communicated with the agreement's contract managers, Darren Kishiyama and Daniel Horgan, via regular status meetings and memos that we issued. The contract managers quickly addressed the issues as we went along, and they're here to explain how their processes have changed to mitigate these causes going forward. So, Darren, Daniel?
Mo, can you bring Daniel live, please?
Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Darren Kishiyama. I'm the Authority Contract Manager for the Rail Delivery Partner contract. As Ms. Drager mentioned, the audit findings had been communicated to us over a period of time. So we were fairly well aware of the process involved that the auditors were engaged in, as well as some of their findings along the way. So since October of 2018, when I began managing this contract, the authority side of the management has streamlined their review efforts that resulted in a reduction of time in the actual review of invoices. Streamlined also the way we validated and verified the labor rates so that we would be able to verify that the labor rates being applied in the invoices were correct and that we would be able to resolve issues timely. We also ensured and verified that the appropriate modifications of the rates, such as by escalation or by an annual adjustment in the sub-consultants' overhead rates, were applied correctly to each of the RDP resources. In addition, we also established a quality assurance review of the consultant labor rates that involved requesting periodic submission of the payroll registers from the various sub-consultants on the project. This would help avoid some of the issues that Ms. Drager was able to find in her report from 2015 to 2018. Because of these things, we were more able to effectively manage and administer the authority side of this contract. So I would like to note that since October of 2018, the RDP, which Mr. Horgan will speak to, has taken a very proactive stance in how they're supporting the management of this contract to avoid issues such as those that were found. I still recall from one of my first meetings with Mr. Horgan that he talked about a hand-in-glove approach. And so this positive approach to the relationship really helped to mitigate and reduce disputes on monthly invoices since October of 2018. This in turn allows the RDP consultants to see timely and appropriate payments without a whole lot of delay in the process for payments. With that, I'll ask Mr. Horgan to provide some information on the RDP side.
Apologies for interrupting. Mr. Horgan, if you can turn on your camera so the technical team can identify you and give you the proper permissions. Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if Mr. Horgan is having technical issues at the moment.
Okay, let's go on
It
with,
appears he's on. It appears he's on now. He just needs to unmute.
okay.
Good morning, committee. My name is Daniel Horgan, as Darren kindly said. I'm the RDP project manager representing WSP. So, as
Mr.
Darren,
Horgan, I apologize for interrupting. Would you please spell your name?
Page, Organ.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so as Darren said, our approach to working has always been hand in glove. It's a transparent approach, providing the necessary information. And as Darren said, historically, not everything was as diligent as it should be, but going forward, and certainly since I've come on board, working with Darren, we've implemented rigorous procedures, and basically we've got a full corrective action plan which is being implemented. So that includes enhanced training, which we've rolled out. So that's training for all our partners and sub-consultants, so they understand the FAR regulations. And for some of the small companies, especially, you know, where a company has only 1 or 2 staff, these regulations are quite complex. So we're rolling out significant training. We've implemented revised procedures and policies to ensure everybody understands the requirements so they can be fully met and adhered to. We've also introduced new subcontract terms and conditions so that our partners and sub-consultants fully understand their obligations, and they are audited regularly and enforced. So we've also started random auditing. So we do random audits of our partners and sub-consultants to ensure that they meet the requirements. And I'm very confident, working closely with Darren and the authority going forward, that these issues will be absolutely minimized. It is likely that we could still have some issues from some historic contracts, because some of them were brought on board 5-6 years ago, when the I would have to admit were not as rigorous or as diligent as they are today. But going forward, WSP is fully committed to implementing the process and procedures 100%. And I would like to thank Darren for his support. Okay, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do have a question. This is Ernie Camacho. There was one of the firms that were, I guess, questioned or subject to this review. I guess it was Thoman Consulting. He was, as I read the report, he was not able to, or didn't, or refused to be reviewed, have his books open to the audit. What did we do with that?
So I'm going to let Mr. Hedges speak to that.
Right.
Take it away.
I had the same question as Mr. Camacho.
Ernie, Nancy, what we did was this: per our procedures, we convened an audit committee, which was chaired by Alicia. We reviewed all of the circumstances involving this contractor. We verified that we received services for approximately the amount that was invoiced. Okay. We then basically reduced to ensure that, since there was not audible, as to make sure that we had our coverage, right, and to allow flexibility. We reduced that invoice of approximately $1 million by $200,000, as agreed with WSP, with regards to that one subcontractor.
How did you verify it, Joe? Oh, I'm sorry, Ernie, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nancy.
How did we? The audit committee, Darren went back, verified the deliverables that were received, and that we had basically received a reasonableness factor with regards to services rendered.
Is this person still under contract? Is this company still under contract?
Long gone.
Okay.
That was the problem. We had very little leverage over the individual. It was a one-man type firm who has since literally shut his doors and relocated to Mexico.
With the money, how do these bills get paid without proper verification? That's a concern of mine.
Darren, go ahead.
So these rates and the overhead are established before they actually bill to the contract, so that we're able to determine that, one, their overhead is justifiable. So they submit auditable information. But the issue here is that we weren't able to go back and review their records to determine the appropriateness of the entirety of what they submitted. So that's one of the components that's associated with what the auditor, Ms. Drager, had to go back and do that she was not able to access, which were those records that would help validate post-charging that they're appropriate and correct. But when they come onto the program, we do a certain amount of due diligence to confirm that what they've submitted is correct and appropriate to be charged. But because of the failure to have access to the records after the fact, that's where the problem for this particular subconsultant came into effect.
Have you fixed that, Darren?
And that's part of the process that we've engaged with the RDP for their education of their subconsultants to make sure that the overhead rates are all substantiated, that they are providing the right information as far as a consistency of approach. And so we feel that we have better confidence in the data up front. I wouldn't say that we have fixed it 100% because I can't guarantee that every sub would refuse or would comply with the requirements of the contract. But the contract is the contract, and WSP has been reminded of these facts.
Are these contracts allowing us to audit, or is that part of the contract?
Yes, these are all roll down provisions for any contract engaged greater than $25,000.
And when did you pick up the mantle on this? In 2018?
Correct. October of 2018 is when I became the RDP contract manager.
So this is basically 2015 to 2018 when you started.
Correct. Most of the audits that are underway are for a time period where I was not responsible for the contract.
Does anyone know, did we do any auditing prior to 2015?
There was an audit of the PMT contract, which was
Yes.
prior to 2015. So that was the
Correct.
predecessor contract to the RDP contract.
I wonder how much of this overbuilding occurred before 2015.
I believe the PMT audit was had findings of a recommendation for recovery of over $1 million, but I couldn't speak to the specifics.
That's correct. Approximately $1 million. And that was a little bit different because the period of the audit covered, I believe, was 9 fiscal years of that contract. So it was a bigger time period. I'm not sure exactly how many sub-consultants were audited, but there were several sub-consultants. And I think the dollar amount was a lot greater in the overall audited, billed and reimbursed cost.
Thank you.
Did this contractor operate under a provisional rate initially, or was it a defined rate?
I believe it was a defined rate.
So he was audited at the commencement of the contract. So what you were looking for is billable hours against the contract.
So I don't think we performed an audit, what we call a pre-award, but what Darren and WSP were doing was reviewing the information that was submitted by the consultant to determine the reasonableness of the overhead rate. And at audit, we want to go back, we want to verify the costs included in that rate. So an audit wasn't performed at the beginning, but just a review. And at this point, when we're doing the audit, we're trying to verify those costs in the overhead rate. And so what happened is, like Darren mentioned, or Joe mentioned, Mr. Thoman shut down his business and he was like, I have no records for you to review. That's basically what happened here.
But Darren just said that they had a defined rate, not a provisional rate. So in fact, did they So you did audit that rate, the labor rate going in, which includes the overhead rate.
So what, I don't know if Darren wouldn't have done it because he wasn't the contract manager at the time. So what was done, maybe WSP can explain a little bit more.
I wasn't here either, but I can.
So,
Some of the background information is this particular person, Tillman, was a WSP employee and he decided to set up his own small business. So the rate was slightly less, the charge out rate was slightly less when he set up his own business. So that's sort of really the background.
All right, so I mean, regardless who was there, we should have a record of a process that took place, is what I'm looking for, is so that we don't duplicate a bad process
Right.
again. So it just, so initially you have a pre-award audit, which would establish a rate, overhead rate, and so you would either give them a provisional rate or defined rate. And so I've heard two different answers. One, that there was a defined rate, and other that perhaps it was not a defined rate. So I'm just trying to understand. So, you know, this individual is a single individual firm with one individual billing hours. And so if in fact we gave him a provisional or a defined rate, all we're looking for is number of hours to ensure that the work was done.
So he was given a defined rate, and he did substantiate his rate through overhead statements. So part of the validation process that audits does is needing to go back in and determine that the costs that he's specifying in his overhead rate were correct and allocable to the contract.
Yes.
So, so in essence, yes, some of the hours that he bills to the contract, whether or not it's whole or partial, whether or not all his costs are that construct his overhead are correct and true, those are the aspects. So yes to the substantiated rate. And then the problem really is trying to go back and verify that everything that he was billing to the contract was appropriate.
Because you're talking about pre-award was done, we audited that rate. So it's just misleading when the report says that he was not opening up his books to anything. He did in fact do that initially. You audited a rate and you weren't able to verify it as a post audit.
And there's a fine point to the pre-award too, because as Mr. Horgan said, the pre-award would really be farther back in time towards 2015. And so Mr. Toman was not a sub-consultant at that point. So I think probably what you're meaning is before he came onto the contract, did we review his information? Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Toman, or Toman, whatever you pronounce it, was a subcontractor to WSP, correct?
That's correct.
So isn't WSP on the hook for this?
Correct.
So if there's a reimbursement, it needs to come from them, and it's their responsibility to go after Toman.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question. So Joe, you said you went back through, you looked at his invoices and you determined that there was a value provided except to the extent of about 200,000. Is that correct?
Now, what we did is we went back through, we determined the approximate value provided to his about $1 million of invoice that was in dispute. We went then back there and asked Darren to do a comprehensive study to verify a range of rates with regards to other like of kind type consultants. We then agreed that a reduction of $200,000 of that $1 million invoice was adequate protection with regards to the authority to ensure that we were able to validate his rates.
So why is that not a note in this audit report that all occurred?
There is with regards to the audit committee, there is a finding of fact that I have before me with regards to that. I don't know if it's in the audit committee or not. Go ahead.
So, Director Miller, this audit committee convened as a result of this audit report. So we issued this, and then the audit committee, Joe and everybody, addressed that issue. So that's why it's not part of this report.
Yeah, but
And they could not even begin that process until we issued a report of finding.
no, I understand that, but notice usually you have a audit report and then you have management responses and you know how they corrected a problem. That's how I typically see audits come through. So there's always management notes, typically responses. So do we not follow that kind of a process in our audits?
We did receive a response. It's not included in this report, but we can provide that information to you.
Well, I just mean
Like
on
Joe
the
said,
web, yeah, on the web, it just shows this and it doesn't show any response or any, you know, conclusion about what High Speed Rail has done about the problem, which is important, I think, for the public to know, to be transparent, how we responded to the audit, corrections that have been made, what we did with Toman, those kinds of things. And typically, I like it included in the audit or at the end so that it's an easy way of answering, what did we do about this problem?
That's right.
Nancy, I think from my perspective, I think your point is very well taken. I think in this case, the response that the authority did to this was correct in going through our checks and balances on this and a thorough review. And I think you're right that we will endeavor in future audits to make sure that those responses to these audits and these findings are clearer and stated in the audits going forward.
Okay, thank you. And maybe you could just issue a supplement on the website, because when you Google this man right now, that this audit report comes up, but there's no response to it, right? If you're
precisely
looking for information. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Brian, what it suggests is, at least as I read this, was that someone denied access to their books, is the way I read it, and got away with that. And it just from a procedure standpoint, I know that's not what happened. We're going to hold someone accountable. In this case, it'll be WSP for any of the differences between what the findings are and what he billed, perhaps. But the point is, I guess what Nancy is raising is a process or a procedure that we either didn't define properly in this report or we didn't have in place. And it just looks bad.
Yeah, no, Ernie, I concur that I think we should be clear on what the response has been, and that must be part of the record. I also would just say that this is the exact reason we do these audits. It's why we do the back end audits to find any issues like this and then put in place the proper responses. And so I think it's important that those proper responses are part of the record, and we will endeavor to make sure that happens going forward.
Thank you.
We will do that.
For the record, it's all defined in a January 21st, 2021 memorandum that was issued out. There is official record as I speak, so there's no issues there. Okay.
So even that report, as I read it as well, is somewhat ambiguous.
I agree. And that's why I like management responses in audits, because you can see the problem and then you can see exactly what management did to resolve it. And then you can go from there. But I know that we did resolve it, because I do know the note that you're talking about, Joe, but I agree with Ernie. It's better if it's in a response. You know, it just could be clearer, I guess is what I'm saying.
I agree.
We'll make sure we do that, and we'll add that to our next report also.
I want to say I could not agree more. The structure that Nancy outlined for the audits and the responses to audits are what we need to be doing consistently going forward, and we will.
Thank you.
I believe Tom might have fallen offline. I'm happy to proceed, Vice Chair Miller, with the financial report. If you,
yes, let's proceed. Let's proceed to the next item. Thank you.
Great. So I will bring up a PowerPoint here. This is our financial reports executive summary, and our reporting month here is January. And I'll start.
Can I interrupt for a second, Brian? I apologize. I forgot that I was muted, but I wanted to ask a couple of other questions. I want to go back to the other item for a moment, please. First of all, Teresa, are you still on?
Yes, I'm here.
So what I had said, one thing is the process on this was not similar to what we've
Excuse
done
me.
on other audits where we actually do have the response from management and have had that every time. So this was really quite unusual. And this committee had asked for this audit, and it may have been management had done it also, but it was one that we had thought that was important. Let me ask. So we've got 5 consultants who you looked at. Is this the total population of your audit? The 5 consultants that are identified in the report?
No, actually, we are doing an audit of 18 sub-consultants and then WSP, the prime. So there will be a total of 19 separate audit performed. And all of them are, well, what was issued in this report was completed. Since the issuance of that report, we've completed 3 more and issued 3 memos, and the rest are in process. And we're hoping to complete them by the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, and so we'll see a follow-up on this audit when that's all completed.
Yeah, we'll see a second report that will include the rest of the sub-consultants and WSP.
Okay.
And then we'll be sure to include the response.
Okay.
And I'll have to check with Paula, who's out, why the response was not attached and included to be posted.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I think that probably completes my questions. I just wanted to mention one thing, and I hope I'm not embarrassing you. I think I've heard that you are getting ready to move on to other grounds after having a stunning career with the state. And I just wanted to, on behalf of our committee, thank you, Teresa. You've been an amazing complement to the internal audit staff. Your work has been stupendous, frankly. And
thank you so much.
I know that you will be missed, and I wanted to let you know, if it's within the realm of possibility, if you ever decided to come back, I'm sure that we would all be happy to see you back in your chair.
Oh,
So,
thank you so much.
best to you, and thank you for everything.
Yes, and just to elaborate on what Tom said, I'm not leaving the authority, I'm retiring. So I'm very excited
Those two
about
are
that.
those two are mutually exclusive. So anyway, thank you.
Yes,
very
if
much.
if it wasn't for retirement, I would be here for,
Okay.
I don't know how long, till I retired.
Okay.
So thank
All
you.
the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Sorry, Brian, you can move forward now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and sorry for jumping the gun before. We'll see if we can pull up the PowerPoint again. So we start with our accounts payable, aging, and disputes report. And we've hit a bit of a milestone here with 48 months now without a payment penalty. So that's 4 years without any late payments as defined by the state's Prompt Payment Act. 48 wins, 0 losses over the past 4 years. So I did want to just note that the good work of the accounting staff, but also the various project managers under Joe and others at the authority, when the accounting staff have issues, they've been responsive. So we appreciate that. Going on, we also note that our number or dollar amount of invoices under dispute dropped slightly. We've discussed in prior F&A meetings that it's gone up in recent months due to some invoices submitted by Dragados for CP23 that haven't been payable and are under dispute. However, that did not grow in January. And then we also note a few disputes resolved with Caltrans, City of Fresno, and WSP, which again results in the slight drop month over month in disputes. I'll move down to the second half or the bottom page here, cash management report. You'll see our bond, Prop 1A bond cash holding fairly steady. As the committee knows, we've exhausted our current Prop 1A appropriation for the Central Valley and environmental work and anticipate an appropriation later this year for the 21-22 fiscal year by the legislature for additional Prop 1A funding. But our remaining Prop 1A balance and our remaining appropriation authority for 1A will help us with complete our bookend obligations, Caltrain and LA Union Station, and also our state operations or state staff funding as well. But our Central Valley construction and environmental work is now funded through our cap and trade balance, and that's the next item here. You'll see the cash balance at the end of January was about $1.8 billion. We do note here at the bottom of the page that we had an auction of about $147 million in November, and we have preliminary auction results from February that were about $162 million. Before we include these in our cash balances, we do wait for the Air Resources Board to verify the auctions and their calculations, which takes about a month after the auction ends. And then there's a process through Department of Finance and the Controller's Office before we reflect that in our cash. But again, the good news here is the last two auctions have been good. They've been what we call fully subscribed, meaning that all of the allowances offered were sold. These two auctions combined total a bit over $300 million to the authority. The other piece of good news that since these two auctions were fully subscribed, under the rules of the auction, the Air Board may choose to offer some of the allowances that were unsold in May of 2020 and August 2020 auctions due to COVID. So there is a possibility that our remaining auctions this calendar year may be robust if in fact they reflect the full sale of all offered allowances, which again we expect to be higher due to the offer for a sale of some of the previously unsold allowances. But we'll of course continue to update the F&A committee as future auctions occur. The last note here, we have this small fund called the Rail Property Management Fund that's revenue received from our ownership of property, leases on authority-owned parcels. And that fund balance has grown over time. It's now $10.2 million. I will mention we do have a request with the legislature to augment our spending authority out of that fund. It's typically been limited to $750,000 a year, and our request is to increase that to $4 million a year, such that we'll be able to use these cash resources as well for some of our property-related expenses in the Central Valley.
Brian, before you go on to the next page, I'd like to go back up for a moment, just an associate question to the disputed invoices. The information that you had provided last month with regards to questions had to do with regatos and change orders, and whether or not change orders were being submitted for payment for work that had not been done. And that Joe had indicated that there would be a letter sent to them to direct them to stop invoicing for change orders that have not been approved. I assume that was approved and or the work done. So I just want to make sure that we understand with regards to change orders, are we paying any change orders for work that has not paying for any change orders for work that has not been done?
The answer is no. And the other subtlety is, for some instances, the contractor may proceed with some amount of work at risk. And some of these perhaps were in that category as well, where the contractor has incurred some expenses at risk, but we would not pay it either, as you say, for work not completed, nor would we pay for work that's not yet in an approved change order.
Perfect. So if they do work that's at risk for work that would be later presented in a change order, if that change order was not approved by the authority, the work that they did at risk is on them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, Tom, I have a question.
Sure.
Going back to your question, Tom, and Bren, have we in fact paid for change order work that has not been done in the past?
We have not allowed CP23 to accrue any work that has not been authorized by contract or supplemental change orders, right? The only work allowed to accrue against is work that is by executed contract or change order. So the answer is no.
So we have
And that obviously includes not just 2, 3, but that's 1 and 4.
Yeah, there is a multiple tier process that starts in the field and works its way all the way up through finance and the Office of Program Delivery as to ensure that that is the case.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Ernie, do you have a follow-up? Okay, hearing none. Go ahead, Brian. Thank you.
I believe we can move to the next slide. So this is our administrative budget and expenditures report. And starting at the top, the budget for the fiscal year. Since this report includes January, there is a small but formal adjustment to our fiscal year budget here, noting our budget has fallen $600,000 from 73.6 million to 73.0 million. And the reason for that is this picks up the governor's January 10th budget, which also includes adjustments to this current fiscal year. And there were both issues that administrative adjustments that added cost and those that reduced cost. On net, of course, this is reduced, and I would note the primary reason for the reduction is the cost savings measures such as the furloughs that are going on this year. The spending for the month of January here on state operations was $4 million, same as December. Cumulative expenditures for the fiscal year through January, $25.4 million. And so we're spending at a rate where we will not likely reach our full budget, of course. With 58% of the fiscal year completed, we've spent only about 35% of our administrative budget. That's driven, of course, by the large number of state staff positions, new state positions authorized starting July 1 as part of our form to function. And so with many of those positions vacant, we do have savings in our budget. However, we do continue to show advancement in filling vacancies. We've gone from about a 37% vacancy to now 29% at the end of January. And I wanted to also note for the committee, because this has come up in the past, that we now do have 100% of our top executive positions filled. So we have 0 vacancies in our top positions. That was made possible when the governor earlier this month appointed Garth Fernandez as our Central Valley Regional Director. So again, all of the top executive positions are filled. I think the first time since I've been here in about 2 years that we've had all those positions filled. We are filling positions at about a rate of 9 positions per month. Again, often we have to fill, have to hire more than that number to account for retirements and other separations from the authority. But that work continues to progress. And I'll at the end of this presentation, I'll give you an update for February as well. We can move on to the next page. And this is a slide we added recently just to kind of give a broader perspective on our form to function. The only data that's changed really month over month here is the filled and vacant state positions. We do update the top table here, but the bar chart is going to stay relatively stable here until we have a change, such as with the new fiscal year. I believe we can move on to the next slide. So this is our capital outlay budget summary. What we note here is that our expenditures in total for the month of January were 65.5 million, which is a drop of about 15 million from our December expenditures. We also list these by a construction package. When we look at the total construction package on the second bullet, we reflect 55 million. That includes not only the design build work, but also right-of-way, project construction management, etc. The third bullet here listed exclusively for the design build contracts, and you'll see that total was 41 million, comprised of 11.5 million CP1, 16 million CP23, and 13 million CP4. We do show the expenditure as a percentage as well in the fourth bullet against the total contract value. Of course, the contract value will change as contingency is utilized with any future change orders, but this is shows you the current status of spending to contract value. The other thing I want to note here is that as we've looked at some of our cash management issues going forward to assess our need, when we'll need that new Prop 1A appropriation, and of course we have a funding plan submitted to the legislature in February as part of our request for Prop 1A. We did adjust our current year forecast of capital, and that I'll note here in the bottom table. The first column of numbers is fiscal year budget, and you'll note the second column is fiscal year forecast. So we have reflected a reduction relative to our budget of about 1.1 billion, which we've used for our cash flow analysis of a reduced level of spending in this fiscal year. And again, that was done primarily to assess our cash flow need going forward. We will be coming back to the board in either May or June with our 21-22 budget, and in that we will update this yet again and indicate a proposed budget for 21-22.
Any questions for Brian on this slide?
Yeah, one question. Brian, do we have a schedule of when we anticipate CP 1, 2, 3, and 4 to be completed?
Well, of course, the business plan, of course, has dates, and substantial completion is indicated in the business plan. I know 1 and 2 and 3 estimated substantial completion in December of 23. And Joe can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe CP4 is substantial completion in April of 22.
Right.
You're absolutely right. That is reflected in page 40 something. I'll have to get the exact page for you. It's 43 in the business plan. Okay. Currently, right now, to validate that, we have reworked the RBS schedules. In this month, they're finishing right now, and they coincide to those dates. Okay, we're going to have to go back and rework the risk registers as in to verify and see what the P70 looks beyond those. Okay, but right now we're pretty much spot on our projections using what was our engineering best judgments in page 43. We've been able to validate that with the new RBS schedules that are coming out in the next month.
Based on the dollars that we have in the bank, do we have sufficient dollars to complete CP 1, 2, 3, and 4, the civil work in preparation for a tracking system?
Well, I'd probably define in the bank to answer your question. So we, in the previous slide talked about cash balances. So certainly our cash balances in the bank are not sufficient to finish that work. That's why we have the request for the Prop 1A appropriation of 4.1 billion to finish the Central Valley work, including the track and systems. If we obtain that additional Prop 1A appropriation, then that would be sufficient to fund that. And of course, also we do also count on our future cap and trade coming in of at least 500 million a year. And our analysis, both with the 1A and with the future cap and trade of at least 500 million a year, is sufficient to finish that work.
Well, Brian, if in fact we're spending on the CPs somewhere around 55 million, let's just say, even rounding up, say it was even 70 million, there's no way we're going to spend $4 billion by 23, just based if we wanted to project that forward. So why do we need 4.2 billion?
Well, of course, as we've moved up, I think as we report in the business plan again, number of structures from 19 to I believe around 55, number of guideway miles up. So as additional structures are cleared for construction, that will ramp up the monthly billing. So we do expect a significant ramp up to occur as more structures are cleared for construction and get underway.
Even if we projected 100 million a year, a month, we're not going to spend $4 billion.
Well, again, the forecast we have is not that we would spend the entire 4.1 billion in the 21-22 fiscal year. Getting access to that money does allow us to have spend that in the 21-22 fiscal year when we run out of cap and trade. So we may run out of cap and trade in early 22 is our current projection. So the Prop 1A would meet our cash flow needs in the latter half of 21-22, and then also in 22-23 and 23-24. So those resources would be spent down over multiple years, but again, are needed to fund the expected invoices as we get into next fiscal year.
Yeah, but our cap and trade, as you've stated, is projected to increase, hopefully. So that would decrease our need on the 4.2 billion from Prop 1A.
Well, again, we do project cap and trade. Hopefully, it's a conservative estimate, right? That cap and trade will bring in at least 500 million. I think we have to recognize the volatility that is there in that revenue source. It could be lower as well, as we've seen over the last 12 months. But you're right. We do have a number of factors and a number of risk, both in the exact pace of expenditures and also in the receipt of revenues going forward as well.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you, Tom, Mr. Chair. So Brian, I just have a question on, it's on, one is on right-of-way expenditures and budget, and the other is on the contingency. I'm gonna start with the contingency first. You're projecting a remaining fiscal year project contingency, I think, to go down to about 282 million. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So that's an assumption that, well, before we thought that 484 would be spent out of the contingency. Now it's 282 million out of the contingency.
Okay. So when you say remaining fiscal year project, you mean remaining to be spent for the fiscal year, not remaining at the end of the fiscal year in our budget?
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
That's an expenditure of contingency, not an, if you will, assignment of contingency.
Right. Okay. But we show no expenditures. So you're assuming that's expended between now and the end of the year?
Oh, I'm sorry. You looking, for example, the monthly expenditure line where it shows 0?
Yeah, well, I think it shows 0 on every line.
Right. So when the contingency, this is, I think you're pointing out a subtlety here that when we do assign a contingency through a change order, that ceases being contingency and is moved up to the where it's assigned. So to the DB contract, for example.
Right. Is that what's happening?
Yes.
So I guess my concern is we're not keeping pace with our construction project, yet we are eating. I guess I maybe we're not eating into the contingency. When I first looked at that, I thought, oh, we're eating into our contingency more than we should be given our pace of construction. But I think it's just the reverse with your explanation. Is that correct?
I believe so, if I understand your statement. And of course, in a couple slides, we have the
Okay.
look at contingency specifically, which is a little different than the expenditure idea. It's have we assigned contingency,
Right.
and this is trying to get at the expenditure piece of it.
Nancy,
I'll hold off till we get to that slide. Thank you.
can I address this? Is that most of the contingency that we're using right now is with regards to addressing the inclusion of new scope, big items with regards to CP1 as an example, or we have realigned. Golden State is a very good example. We directed realignment of Golden State, right? So in advance of that work, we have to cut a modification, right, to allow that work to proceed with regards to our directive letters. So you are right. In traditional construction, you would assume that you would have this general drawdown of your contingency with regards to as work progresses. But in some cases, we're using large amounts of contingency with regards to this inclusion of scope that was not awarded at time of execution of the contract. Okay.
And for the committee members, Golden State is Golden State Boulevard, which is being impacted and relocated as a result of what we're doing.
And there's numerous types. The CP1 is a very good description of that. If you look in your packages, you will see that we awarded that contract at approximately under $1 billion. Now we're over $2 billion. As a result, majority of that is the inclusion of the scope.
Any follow-up on that, Nancy? Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Sure. I believe we can move on to the next slide, page or slide 6. Okay, so the top table here is showing our expenditures to date. I believe this goes back to 2006-07 fiscal year through January of 2021. And you'll see we've spent $8 billion, and here we define where that money went in terms of type of expenditure. 75% or $6.1 billion was for construction, 16% for project development or environmental work, and then 5% for local assistance, which is the bookend projects, Caltrain, LA Union Station, etc. And then you'll see the remaining about 9% has gone for, the remaining 4% here has gone for direct support of project development and construction on the state administration or state staff side, and then general administration, such as the finance office and human resource office, those type of things, about 2% for general administration. Going below to the federal ARA match, the reporting month is January, so I'll go through that first, but we also had a very positive February that I'll also mention. As of January, as we report here, the federal government, the Federal Railroad Administration, had approved about $750 million of ARA grant match submittals, and they had a pending amount of about $1.556 billion. that were still under review. That left about 200 million as of the end of January that was still in-house at the High Speed Rail Authority, pending submittal to the Federal Railroad Administration. The big news in February, as we note here at the bottom in part, was that the federal government approved an additional 845 million of submitted ARA match, more than doubling their previous approval. And that takes us to about 1.6 billion approved. And the other big news was we submitted that final 200 million in February as well. So now we have 100% of the match submitted. And again, that leaves about 900 million that's still under review with the FRA. And I'll just report they are very engaged on this. There's some questions and responses that continue to go back and forth. So we're again thankful they're fully engaged on this matter, and again have seen more than a doubling of the approved match in just the month of February. Next slide.
Yep.
So our contracts and expenditures report, you see the number of active contracts about the same, 204 contracts. A total contract value up a bit at 8.4 billion. We report here on the small business utilization, 21.5%, which is up a bit both year over year and month over month. We also note in one of the bullets that's up from about 16.2% utilization as of as of February 2015. The bottom bullet, total have 594 small businesses actively working on the project, including 189 disadvantaged business enterprise and 64 certified disadvantaged veteran business enterprises. Next slide. So this is our contingency report, and to contrast with our prior discussion on kind of expenditures, this is our assignment of contingency. So it's assigned when, for example, a change order is executed. And I think the best way to look at the top table is look at the bottom row here by column. And so, for example, we have a CP1, the total allocated contingency when we adopted our baseline in May of 2019 was 1.2 billion. And then we have a CP1 balance column that indicates 356 million remaining. And that going across the same follows. Remaining balance for 2.3 is 264 million. Remaining balance for CP4 is 123 million. We have this other balance category that includes our unallocated contingency, our interim use reserve, and also our other category. Our other category includes things like our track and systems contingency and also certain program-wide contingencies as well. And so our total remaining contingency across the board is that 1.6 billion. This, to be clear, does not include any changes that we would bring to the board with our baseline adjustment, likely in May or June, for the new estimates, the new enhanced risk contingency that is in the business plan. Those would again be a separate adoption or action by the board in likely May or June. As far as the bottom chart here, we do separately report on use of contingency exceeding 25 million. There were none of those to report in January. There were a number of smaller change orders authorized under 25 million that sum to 42 million. And those are, of course, itemized or listed in the CVSR report as well, so you can know what those individual change orders were. Next slide. And so the last slide here is what we call our internally our flash report, kind of our preliminary numbers for February. We'll report in full for the month of February at the April board meeting. The numbers here on the top half are the construction or capital outlay expenditures. And in total, they came in at about 64 million. Again, we do find sometimes these numbers change by the time we get to the full report next month, but month over month, down slightly in total. But you'll notice here the DBs were down more, and the other construction work was up a bit. And so the total DBs was 30.5 million for the month of February. Looking at the bottom left here, we report continued progress in filling vacant positions. Looks like about 8 additional vacant positions were filled in February, reducing our vacancy rate from 29.2 to 27%. And lastly, on the bottom right here, the ARA match, as I mentioned before, at the end of February, we do reflect 100% of that submitted to FRA with about 60% approved, I think 64% approved to date. The other thing I wanted to mention here is we do show a local match to ARA line here, 4.1 million. We did go ahead and cover that with state funds. There'd been some anticipation that we might be submitting some local match, perhaps for some of our station funding. But as we wanted to complete the ARA match and we had eligible state match to submit, we went ahead and submitted that on the state side. So in future reporting, we'll drop this local match line, but I did want to include it here so you're aware of that change and that action.
Thank you, Brian. Joe, can you just give us your take on the DB numbers?
The numbers are what Brian states with regards to that approximately that 30-31 is accurate. Okay, I'll explain as in my piece of the Central Valley report some of the corrective actions that we're taking right now. Predominantly, this decrease in the numbers, it's also reflected by decrease in the number of labor too, is driven predominantly by right-of-way and some late third-party agreements. Also, please remember too, slightly driven by some of the delays that we had with weather. The data that you're seeing this month and in February here is delayed. So we're looking at January and February data. So it's hard to put in context of this beautiful dry skies right now, but that is coming out of the winter, some of the impacts that we have with moving third-party utilities and right-of-way. And I'll explain that in detail as I go through my report.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on your slide, Brian?
That completes my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, Tom, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Can I go back to the slide?
Please.
To the
Brian,
past
can you
slide?
bring the slide back up? Thank you.
Yeah, the number on the DBs, does that reflect, you're talking about dollars that were expended, does that include any change orders?
Well, this is invoiced amounts. So if there was a prior change order that they are invoicing against, it would include those change orders. But if it's an implemented change order that hasn't been billed against, it would not show under the expenditures.
Okay, so we're not talking necessarily the dollar amount that is reflected here is not necessarily forward progress or construction dollars.
Well, it's again their work in this case February that is at this point in time we think eligible for payment. So it would be their billable work that would be based on implemented change orders, base contract work, etc.
Ernie, it's for work that we were able to accrue during that month. If they worked at risk, right, and in previous months, right, and there was a change order that was issued that would allow them to accrue for that completed work, we accounted for it in this invoice, which is reflective, again, of only work performed, work completed.
So, but I mean, that what you're using the word accrue, but this number 41.2 and then 30.5, that's reflective of actual money paid for work that's been accomplished.
Work, yes,
So
absolutely.
it's not accrued, it's already been done.
It's done.
Right, thank you.
We allowed them
Thank you.
to against it.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
and
Anything else, Brian?
No, I just mentioned on a technical point, usually, we'll pay within about 45 days. So with the February data, we'd tend to get invoices by mid-February. Many of those continue to be under review for final payment. So again, it's probably a mix of some of these maybe have been paid and some may be paid in the next week or two.
All right, Brian, thanks very much for the report. Good job, and good job to your team.
Thank you.
Joe, we'll move on up to your Central Valley report.
Yeah, we're going to, following the F&A books, you're in tab 11. I remind the committee that pages 1 through 13 are the summary of the report. So the first page, the first slide that we'll look at is on page 14. Okay. Page 14. This shows basically the cumulative invoicing to what we expect to fulfill the current ARA grant as defined. We define that is with regards to the track being laid with regards to the fulfillment of the definition of ARA. We project that to be at about $5.8 billion currently. That projection will probably adjust in the near term. But also, too, in the next two slides, you will see that we forecasted about $3.2 billion to be invoiced, and we're at 3.1, so we're under. Now, it's hard to see in this scale, right? But if you look at the gradient of the blue line, the slope of the blue line at the vertical red line, you can see that it has flattened. Okay, this is a disturbing trend that we just referenced in the previous conversation. Okay, so this is not, and I will explain why, and to explain also how this is being corrected in the future. Okay, moving on to slides 15 through 16. 15, please. Okay, this is basically an expansion of the previous slide. It allows you to see again is at the 3.2 and 3.1 point at this red line. You can see that we are underperforming and flat here. Okay, we need to come up. Okay, we are not reaching our current projections.
So we've just fallen underneath that line for the first time in a while.
Yeah, but it's hard. The scale is so grand, Tom. It's just you have to pay attention to the scale and the numbers. But you can see though that the line has flattened. Make no mistakes about this.
Yeah.
All right, next slide, please. Okay, this is basically the projections here. As you can see, that we projected our goal and our hope was to be at approximately 79 million. We're about 41. Okay. All right. Now, let me talk about some of the reasons. Okay. CP1, we've been struggling with some third-party approvals. Okay. I think we're breaking through some of those right now with regards to the being able to achieve a milestone. And that milestone is basically in the downtown area. Okay. I anticipate right now, okay, that between now and about the end of July, that downtown shoe fly will be completed. Okay. We've relocated all the utilities that allow UP to come in and to construct that shoe fly. Okay. Now, with that shoe fly completed, right, 3 new structures in the downtown can start. Okay, and that is the UP Tulare, Ventura, structures, and then what we call the G Street kind of overpass. Okay, so right about the end of July-ish, hopefully you will start seeing that downtown new structures underway. Okay, so it's a very good positive sign. Also, too, and probably starting next month, is the IPB is starting to open and blossom. I think we're going to be able to pick up about another 4,000 feet in the north and work another, probably another over a mile in, actually over a mile in the north and just under a mile in the south, okay, which is another good sign of potential to pick up. Now, with that regards to the IPB, you're going to see in this upcoming, not in February, but the upcoming March invoice, probably over $15 million of work completed to the IPB. So very good progress on the IPB. Okay. With regards to 2-3, a milestone was just recently achieved. It is not reflected here, and it's one of the things that hampered. And that is that Right Away was able to achieve the critical parcels to be able to open the Tule River, or the Tule Viaduct, which is a 3,600 foot structure. It's the second longest structure in CP23. So that work can start commencing. The dry weather holds. We should be able to open up another 6 miles down in the southern region of 2-3 with regards to the guideway. And we're starting work on the curved bridge as I speak. Okay. Now, we're also tracking another 14 structures in 2-3 that have the potential of opening in the next, between now and the summer. Okay. Optimistically, I would probably say that we will achieve about 50% of that 14. Okay. So there is work progressing and pushing. It is slow and lagging, as I've articulated in these graphs. Okay. Another big thing that's a good sign of progress is, as I reported out before, the last of the designs, CP4 is complete. The last of the designs in CP1 and CP23 are completing and will be done by the end of April. Okay, next slide, moving to page 17. You can see here, this is indicative. This is another leading edge indicator of work progress. It's the number of workers out in the field. I look here as in to see, you know, where this is headed with regards to trends, with regards to production. Remember, using invoicing and number of workforce is a looking at a trend indicator. Now with the new RBSs, I think we're going to be able to even expand some of the current key performance indexes a little bit further, so that you start talking, hopefully in the near future, CPI, SPI type concept. Okay. But again, this reflects what I've reported before. Okay. Moving to page 18. Okay, I'm just going to read this. We have about 80 miles underway compared to the 119 that's currently under contract. That's about an increase of 1 mile, nothing really too big. CP1, we have about 13 miles substantially complete. We're about 2 miles behind. Those 2 miles should be picking up this month. CP23, we're about 46 miles of the 62 miles down there. We're 7 miles behind, as I indicated. If this dry weather holds, we should be able to start work in what we call the last 6 miles. So that will then, that 7 then will be picked up and borne by 6.
Joe, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
So when you're talking about either being behind or ahead on say structures or guideway, does this, when you're referring to, let's say, being behind, is that behind or ahead relative to the completion dates that are reflected in the new business plan, or is it some other delivery date that's not been updated to what the business plan is stating?
This is not, what you're looking at is what I call revision number 1 of the RBSs, which had us focusing to completion towards ARA. As Brian Kelly, as we've disclosed in the business plan, that achievement of the current ARA definition is probably not achievable, right? And you will see this reporting for the next couple months, because remember, there is a lag, right? In approximately the April data, you will see this updated to the new RBSs. That will include these projections and also the right-of-way projections also. Again, everything is coherent in this report, okay? All the delivery dates is tied to the schedules.
So the dates that you're showing here are still the dates that would have been consistent with a 12/31/22 delivery?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And it does skew.
I think, I'm sorry, Tom.
Yes, please go ahead, Nancy.
I just think in a follow-up to the chair's point, Joe, it's important to note that because you've accounted for this delay in the new business plan, if I am understanding you.
We have, and I wanted you to be sure that in my terminology, and I apologize, is that we have done the science that validates what was my engineering best guess at the time of the business plan. Remember, the business plan numbers are reflective of a early fall projections with the data that we have. As I've stated before to the FNA, the process that we now have in place that we've worked for 3 years is now a cycle that is continuously evolved and revolved.
Right.
Okay? So we just completed, right? We updated all of our right-of-way dates. Okay. Use those dates then to update the construction schedules. So now it allows us to reset it all again. So again, I'd like to present, and I'm more than willing to present to the F&A committee as into the reset of the RBSs at your convenience.
Well, I think what we're doing right now, I mean, once there's an action on the business plan, then what we may be seeing here with the new delivery dates will show that we're not behind. It'll be consistent with what the business plan is saying. Is that correct?
It will, but again,
I think you're presenting it the right way, because right now the plan has always been to work against a delivery date of 12/31/22.
And again, in my perspective as a humble chief operating officer, any open site is a good site. Anything that we can push to get open, right, to get third-party agreements, design, right away, first order work out of the way, is a great site because it presents the ability of opportunity.
Tom, can I just add one other data point to the thinking on this? I think it's right the way you're getting the presentation until the business plan is adopted. But the other element that will be in this, we are, as you guys know, we've started some settlement conversations with the FRA on issues. But one of those issues is delivery dates. Yeah. And so that still needs to finalize before we set what the sort of final delivery date.
Yeah, no, that's a good clarification.
I just think that's just one more thing that will inform what this looks like as we present after we have updated.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed. Yeah, thanks, Brian.
It's important to remind people of that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Also, Tom, can I say something quickly?
Sure.
You made a statement. Well, first I'll then go back to Joe. Joe, I've never heard you described as humble, but
Try to be.
okay. But Tom, the statement that you made that we are going to, we know we're behind right now, and because we move the date out does not make us not behind. We're still behind. We're just moving the date. It's like with a budget. If we have $10 and we've gone over budget because we raise our budget to $20, doesn't mean that we are, that we have more money to spend. So I just wanted that to be clear.
Yeah, it's not more money. It's just a completion date. And with Brian's
Brian is absolutely
with
correct.
Brian's statement, he's absolutely right. I mean, the delivery date is going to be what's been agreed upon with FRA. It's not necessarily what we're showing in the new business plan.
Well, I'm sure with Brian's talent, he'll be able to negotiate a favorable date for us for extension.
You're putting unfair pressure on me, Ernie.
You have a lot of confidence there, Brian.
Thank you. No, I do. I did want to just say one thing, because this has been a little bit of a point of awkwardness for us all. Is just, we present to the FNA on where things are with a certain snapshot, and that snapshot is in the midst of changing.
Yeah.
We need to get to the new picture so we can present this properly. I think Ernie's point is dead on. It doesn't mean we're suddenly on schedule on budget, but I will say that we've acknowledged those things already publicly in terms of those challenges. We're in the midst of the reset on those, and we are through the execution of the business plan. And I think a proper discussion with the board going forward on exactly why we have the things that we have to settle and move forward on to see this work really advance. And so this is an important transition period for us to get update the entirety of the conversation. But I appreciate all the comments.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ernie,
Thanks, Brian.
Ernie, to be humble again.
Well, then that's not Joe talking.
Okay, it is. But your assumption is correct, right? What you need to please understand is this, okay? What is on schedule, right? The definition, what is on schedule is relative until we incorporate all of the known risks, these known risks with regards to additional scope into the contracts. And we have the contracts fully embracing all of the scope. With that, you can clearly have an end to this work. And that's been the struggle in the last couple of years, is trying to get our hands around that. And now with the completion of the designs, right, it allows us to do that. Because with this completion of the designs, it includes the inputs and the direction from all of the third parties, as in to be able to define that, to scope it, to negotiate it, and then to execute it and include it.
I won't respond to that in the interest of time. We can talk about that in the board meeting.
I would like that. Okay.
Okay, let's keep on going.
Sure. Let me go back to structures. Currently reporting about 58. Number in reality right now is about 60 out of 93. It's a good sign in the sense we're about 2/3 of the structures are open and have the potential as in to start working. Okay. The big one, the last bullet in the summary, is utility relocations. Okay, we've relocated about 20% of the utilities. We have about another 506 in progress. We're scheduled to start another 139, which is about 7%. Right? We have not started approximately 860, which is 42%. There's over 2,000 utilities that need to be relocated, and is underway as we speak. We are tracking each and every one of the uncompleted, unscheduled utility relocations. Next slide, please. This is the small business summary slide. Okay. What you're seeing here is that we have basically, this is, by the way, too, this is even a month behind. This is as of December. there are approximately 451 small business contracts awarded at a value of about 1 billion for only the design build contractors, CP1 through 4, the DB contractors. Okay. Currently, right now, as we speak, right, with the total, if you look at the total expenditures in December, was about 1.4 billion. The goal to that is just about 513 million. So we're at about 18.3%. Slide 20, please. Okay. The big news in this, the governor announced 2 days ago the appointment of Dennis Kim to the director of right-of-way. Sorry to say that Jennifer Loudon is retiring after a very distinguished state service with regards to some personal issues. We're going to be very blessed to be able to keep her working as a retired annuitant. So we're not losing Jen, right? We're just losing half of her time. Dennis is currently the deputy director of right-of-way. So he's very familiar with right-of-way. He was instrumental, Dennis, in fixing the third-party agreements. That was Dennis's work. So he has a very proven track record. Okay.
Joe, can I just ask with regards to just right away then, with regards to where we've got to lay the track for the R grant, where do we stand on the level of having secured the right of way for all of that?
Right now, we are under 500 parcels, about 480 some parcels as we speak today. I'll talk to you in terms so that you can, in today's numbers, that you can see. Okay. You can see that currently right now against the old RBS, okay, we have about 64 delinquent. Well, let me just talk to your point right here, Tom. Mm-hmm. You can see that we've acquired right now, there is 2,290 parcels. Okay. Right. Remember, a parcel, our definition of a parcel is a acquisition action. You know, we could have been bought, a lot of these parcels are supplemental buys on the same parcels. Okay. Out of those actions, okay, we have completed just under 1,800 of them. Uh-huh. Okay. Now, what's important out of this is when we deliver a parcel to a design builder, that gives him access to that parcel to do construction. You can see January was not a strong month. It was 5 parcels, as you can see by the lower table. Mm-hmm. Complete disclosure here. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, this slide is back to what we talked about before. This is the RBSs that have basically to achieve ARA. Okay, you can see that there's currently 64 what I call delinquent parcels. A delinquent parcel is any parcel from January 21st to the left. You can see that we're about 64. Now, in January, let me explain January. Currently, right now in January, the goal, as you can see in January, was 30 parcels. Okay, we delivered 5 as we reported. Since, remember, this is January data. We've been able to deliver 3 more of those parcels. So there's 22 parcels that are delinquent right now. 4 of those parcels will be delivered, right? By summer. They were delayed. Basically, the escrow agreements have been cut. It's just with regards to slow cost of cure work. We'll have another parcel, I'm pretty confident. So that means that we'll drop the number of delinquent parcels by the summer in January to about 17. Now, here's what you need to understand. This is very important. Okay, is that we're probably going to take my guess is about 8 of that remaining 17 through negotiation. Negotiation is just a slow process. Okay, now the other remaining 9 are what we call dual process. These are parcels that we're struggling with negotiation. Any parcel that is like that, we are proceeding to achieve going to the Public Works Board to start the condemnation process. So 9 of those parcels have the probability of going through the condemnation process. Now, I want to start and make sure any parcel that we are struggling with, that we initiate the condemnation process, right? So that we have a date, at least kind of a date certain to when that parcel will be delivered. But that will not preclude us to continuing the negotiation all the way up, as they say, to the steps of the courthouse. Okay, that's a very good summary. So you can see we have right now, partially 9 of these parcels could go through the condemnation. This is probably the biggest risk to the program. Okay. Very little control over that. Okay, next slide, please. You can see here, railroads, no issue. We are able to achieve railroad parcels. The agreements in place, like Contingency Report. When we need them, we're able to acquire them. That is not an issue. Next slide, please. This shows you with regards to agreements. You can see with land rights. You can see there's no issues with land rights. Back in December, you can see that there was 1 land rights we did not achieve. That is associated to right-of-way. Right? We cannot convey the land rights on a piece of property that we do not yet own. Okay. However, though, in that one, we were able to do a workabout, right, and to try to mitigate that delay, that loss of that 1 land right. Okay. And again, as I compliment Dennis Kim, the new director of right-of-way, this is his work. We completely reset that relationship with these major third parties, PG&E, SCE, FID, FMCD. Very good work here. Remember, less than January 20th is when we started to move these. You can see the substantial progress that has been made here. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, this goes basically into the summary of the third-party agreements. Hopefully, we'll be able to work through our Wasco agreements. Semi-Tropic, North Kern, keep reporting. Both of those are working. We keep making incremental progress in each of those. Hopefully, with regards to Semi-Tropic, we'll have those agreements back by the end of this week. That'll allow us to finalize. Legal just gave final comments back to North Kern on their agreement. So hopefully that will be resolved in the next week or 2. Next slide, please. Again, next slide, please. This goes into each of the CP projects. Okay. I want to stress that let's go to page 29, please. This is a list of the change orders that were executed during this month. You can see there was 3 change orders for a total of just over 17 million. The big one was with regards to an increase in it acts like a provisional change order. It's for environmental services that we directed TPCP to perform for us. Okay, so you see that is the major driver change order there. Okay, if you go to we'll shift to page 40 for 2.3. This is the executed change orders in 2.3. You can see the big drivers here. again, is for continuation of environmental services, and then execution of a mod that we're currently under review right now with regards to establishing a precast yard that for the creation of the tub girders for the canal structure. Okay, I'm doing right now, as I speak, a review of that mod. It's executed, but I have an internal review underway on that. I want to look.
This is on the last one on the page?
It is on the last one on the page.
Okay, great.
All right. Let me switch then to page 4, or page 51, excuse me. My favorite number, 51, is the change orders in CP4. This is there is one more smaller change order with regards to the IPB. Right, this is the last. This is with regards to the construction of a berm and the additional construction of some drainage associated with creating the IPBs. This is, and remember I reported back in September to the board with regards to the IPB status. This aligns to that presentation given in September. Okay, there will be one more smaller change order. That's the last of the change orders with regards to the IPB in CP4. We did it incrementally as to keep the work advancing, right, and to prevent the contractor from being in a dilemma of working at risk. And that concludes my report. Any questions, please?
Any questions for Joe? All right, I hear none, Joe. Thank you. Good report. We appreciate it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the agenda for today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting. We will be going to the board meeting starting at 11 a.m. this morning, so please join us if you have time. With that, again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and my committee members. Thank you very much.